Thank you so much for finding time to be with us this afternoon. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, where we get to bring you the latest news from across the continent of Africa. And then later on, we shall have another discussion on the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on the continent of Africa. So a very good morning. Good evening, depending on where you're tuned in today. My name is Miriam Ogutu. And in just a little bit, I'll be joined by a panelist, and we shall have a conversation on some of these countries and, of course, our main topic of discussion. We start our bulletin from South Sudan. Increased cases of sexual violence against women and girls in restive areas have been aided by systematic impunity. This is according to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan. In a detailed 48-page report, women and girls intimated that rape was being perpetrated by all armed groups across the country. The report found that these attacks are not random opportunistic incidents, but usually involved armed soldiers actively hunting down women and girls. While presenting the report in Geneva on Monday, Commission Chair Yasmin Soka said that it is completely outrageous and unacceptable that women's bodies are systematically used on this scale as the spoils of war. Urgent and demonstrable action by authorities is long overdue, and South Sudanese men must stop regarding the female body as territory to be owned, controlled, and exploited. And the meeting was attended by a representative from South Sudan Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. The government has not officially responded to this report. We go to Tanzania, and Tanzania will begin the constitutional change process after the 2025 general elections. A statement issued by State House intimated that a new constitution will be among the key issues the country will address in the long run. To Somalia, and at least 4.5 million people are on the brink of famine and in dire need of urgent food aid in Somalia. With livestock dying and prices of essential goods like food and water increasing, the number of people who have been internally displaced has also increased simultaneously, necessitating for setting up of new refugee camps for internally displaced people. According to the United Nations, almost 700,000 people have been forced from their homes in search of food and water, and the numbers would let. The shortage of water has caused a spike in diseases like cholera, measles, and acute diarrhea, with medical centers witnessing a sharp increase in admissions of acutely malnourished children. Humanitarian agencies say there is a huge funding crisis. They only have 3% of what they say is needed to help the country. And then we head over to Mali, and Mali's former Prime Minister Somelu Bubuye Maiga, who has been on trial for corruption charges, has died at the age of 67. Mr. Maiga died on Monday at a hospital in the capital, Bamako, his family has said. His family had previously said he was detained under deplorable conditions. He was admitted in hospital in December. His request for medical evacuation had been refused by the military junta, the Associated Press had reported earlier. In a statement, the government said he died after long illness and offered its condolences to the family. Mr. Maiga was arrested in August last year and detained over allegations of corruption in the purchase of presidential jet during President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's administration. The charges are from 2014 when he was the Minister of Defense. Mr. Maiga also served as foreign minister under President Amadou Toumani Touré in 2011. He resigned as prime minister in the aftermath of the outrage over the killing of 160 Fulani civilians in April 2019 in Ogosagu, Mopti region by suspected Dogon hunters. And then we head over back to South Sudan, and the United Nations Human Rights Commission report implicating 142 individuals over gross human rights abuses in South Sudan has not reached the government. The report, issued on Friday, 18th March 2022, the UN expert listed 142 people to be investigated over human rights abuses in the country. The names of the persons mentioned were not made public during the submission. The Commission said the alleged crimes by individuals include massacre, massacres, torture, abductions, detention, looting, burning of villages, and forced displacement, as well as rape and sexual violence. The sixth report of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan was presented by Chairperson Yasmin Suka and two of her colleagues, Andrew Clapham and Bani Efako. The report detailed the bloody conflict which took place in areas of Tambura, Warrap, Jonglei, and the Greater Pibor and Bentui, and in Unity states. And then, still staying with South Sudan, again, the chairperson of the ceasefire monitoring body postponed its technical committee meeting on Monday after SPLA-IO representatives in the committee staged a walkout over alleged attacks in Unity and Upper Nile states. Lieutenant General Astrad Dinero said he will refer concerns raised by SPLM-IO to RJMEC. He also added that the concerns raised by SPLM-IO members does not fall under his docket, and he will table it before the revitalized Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission. The agenda of the day was to discuss the implementation status of the security arrangements and review previous discussions, among other issues. The ceasefire monitoring mechanism's main mandate is to report to IGAD progress in the implementation of the ceasefire agreement in South Sudan. And then we move to Zambia. And the Anti-Corruption Commission has charged the acting chairman of Zambia's main opposition party on 5 accounts, including corruption which involves more than $500,000. Given Luhinda, who is also the country's former justice minister, was arrested on Monday, the charges relate to property belonging to him and several deposits in bank accounts that are suspected to proceed from criminal activity, according to the Anti-Corruption Commission in the country. Lubida's arrest is the latest twist in a series of prosecutions of high-profile officials from the previous executive who was defeated in August 2021 elections. Following his election last year, President Hakainde Hichilema vowed to fight against graft and recover state assets allegedly stolen under the previous government. The former justice minister has, however, been released and awaits a court appearance. We go to Central African Republic, and the country on Monday kicked off national reconciliation talks in a bid to bring peace to the troubled country, but no rebel groups were invited and the opposition is boycotting the forum. Representatives of the ruling party, civil society figures and invited guests attended the opening of the Central African Republic national reconciliation talks in a bid to bring peace to the troubled country. President Faustin Archange Todora promised in the late 2020 to hold the so-called Republican Dialogue for Reconciliation. Several hundred people attended the launch of the forum in the National Assembly. According to the president's spokesperson, the talks are a good opportunity to start over. The peace talks are set to last 1 week. The agenda offers little detail on the debates and the dialogue process itself. It was not until last Thursday that the organizers released a list of 5 themes that include peace and security and political governance, democratic and institutional strengthening. The Central African Republic has been mired in civil war since 2013, despite United Nations peacekeeping mission, which has been present in the country since 2014. Security remains a fleeting dream for the majority of the Central Africans. And that marks the end of our bulletin this afternoon. Interesting. I don't know how the Central African Republic is set to find peace and stability and reconcile with itself, while the main opposition, even the former president's party, Bosize, KNK and other political groups boycotted the talks. So if you're having reconciliatory talks but the key players are not present, that reminds me of a charade of reconciliation talks that President Paul Biya of Cameroon had a couple of years ago that really amounted to nothing, because the government was just talking to itself, as the people who were supposed to be on the table to have these talks with the government side were not present. And this seems to be what is going on in Central African Republic. So if you are having reconciliation talks and yet the people you're supposed to reconcile with are not present and are not represented on that table, who are you reconciling with? I think Central African Republic has to reconcile with itself, and that will mean everybody has to come to the table, and the agenda has to be clear. and the goal has to be clear. Anyway, at this point, I'd like to bring in my panelist this afternoon. I'm joined by Gladwell. I've forgotten the other name. Gladwell, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Kirago.
Yes, good afternoon to you, Miriam. Good afternoon to our viewers.
All right, and I was used to the other name we were calling you, until you corrected that today. So thank you so much for being with us. I think also Daniel Wasonga is there. Okay, Daniel has not yet joined us, but he will perhaps join us, in a short bit. And I know you were listening to some of the items from across the continent. I don't know which one stood out for you that you'd like for us to talk about before we move on to our main topic. Gladwell, can you hear me? Okay, I think we're probably having some technical reception problems with Gladwell there, but no worries. This is what I do here. So I'll just take us through quickly some of the stories, and when Gladwell is able to join us, she will continue with her submission. Like I said, the last story we just finished on Central Africa. Gladwell, can you hear me? Good afternoon. Okay, so you're not able.
Yes, Miriam. Good afternoon.
Okay, we seem to be having a problem with your connection. So I'm sure you were listening to the news items from across the Africa. I don't know which one stood out for you, a story from across the Africa. Can you hear me? Okay, I think we'll just let Gladwell go for right now. Perhaps we will get in touch with her in a short bit and see what's really going on with her connection. And I think another story that perhaps that stood out for me, and I think this should be a cause of worry, because we know perhaps if this really is not taken care of, or this is not addressed, then that will mean a lot of problems, and that is the ceasefire technical meeting that was happening yesterday in South Sudan, and it was postponed because SPLA-IO, that is the side of the first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar, they walked out because they said their soldiers are being attacked. If you watch and you're familiar with the South Sudan story, the soldiers in South Sudan are still in cantonment sites. And so specific soldiers are allied to maybe the President Salva Kiir or his first Vice President Riek Machar or other parties. They all have their soldiers, so they are all strategically placed in different containment sites. Remember, there was supposed to be a unification after the training, so that these soldiers could come together and form one united, army of South Sudan. That has not happened. So they're still in cantonment sites, and they're all in containment side, they're all allied. They can't be put together yet. They're still going through training, which I wonder, how do you expect these soldiers to train and work together and be a united force while they're still, in sectarian, cantonment sites there in South Sudan? But anyway, as SPLMIO said, their soldiers, are being attacked in Unity and Upper Nile states by SSPDF, an allegation that has not yet been confirmed. I think the issue with South Sudan is really, really complicated. And we know when you look at the revitalized peace agreement, we talk about this here every day on Punchline Africa platform. And you know that the implementation, of the security arrangements, this is one of the key factors that was included in the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. Very critical, to helping South Sudan being stable and getting back to the right path. And this has not been able to be achieved yet. This has remained elusive. I don't know if some of this is, intentional. I'm not sure. But, Riek Machar's side is saying our soldiers are being targeted in their stations. And so yesterday during that meeting on the ceasefire monitoring body, that also is the report back to IGAD on the progress. And so the SPLA-IO walked out because they felt that their issues were not being addressed and were not being heard. But what this means then, that the peace process in South Sudan has been thrown into jeopardy. We don't know when, again, this meeting will be held, because yesterday they were to look at, key factors, and they were to discuss the implementation status, how far they've come as a country in terms of implementing the peace process and the security arrangements, and review previous discussion among other important issues that they're supposed to be discussing so that they're able to make progress as far as the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement of 2018 is concerned. That has stalled. The implementation has been painfully slow, and it has not been happening. So when a very important meeting like this is happening and then it fails to happen, that should worry the rest of the stakeholders there in South Sudan. So hopefully they'll be able to get a new date, and the issues being raised by this, SPLA-IO are able to be, addressed, and other issues that also were raised in that meeting, so that South Sudan can, engage properly and make strides toward, achieving some of these important aspects of the peace deal. So that was that. Gladwell, can you hear me? Okay, so Gladwell can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So why is it, I asked a question, I don't know if you can hear my question, because I can't get you a response.
I think we're having technical issues. I'm not clear getting you off.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think it's the bad connection. I apologize for that. But anyway, this in the afternoon, the Diaspora Dispatches, usually we look at stories from across the continent, and then of course we do have our main, topic of discussion, and that will be the effects of the Russian war on Africa. But also there are a few, stories there that I wanted us to look at. Of course, President Suluhu of Tanzania promising constitutional review after the elections in 2025. I think that is perhaps promising, because that is what the opposition has been calling for. So President Suluhu, she seems to be the kind of person who can keep her word. She said that perhaps the government will look into that. After the 2025 general election, they can start the process of reviewing the constitution, among other things. So now, because of the interest of time, let's just jump into our main topic, and that is the crisis, what we see right now in Ukraine, the war that Russia started and provoked in Ukraine, and what are some of the ramifications, the impact that it has on the continent. I don't know if you've started feeling any of this, because we know as much as the war is happening so far away, thousands of kilometers away from Africa, and yet the impact is being felt down to the villages across, Africa, threatening economies and seeing governments come under diplomatic pressure, sometimes to take sides. And also, as this feud escalates, we're seeing the price of very crucial commodities here go up, like we've seen in Kenya right now. The oil has gone up. I hadn't bought cooking oil in a very long time, because I don't use a lot of that. So for me, a liter of cooking oil will go for almost 4 months. That is, so I had not purchased a new one since I think December. So I went to purchase another one just the other day, and I was shocked at the prices, at how much it has gone up. And now I do understand why Kenyans are making noise and are complaining. And this, apparently, it's because of out of the war that we're seeing right now going on in Ukraine. So I don't know, what is your take on some of these effects that are being felt here in the continent from this war in Ukraine? Can you hear me? Okay, I think we'll just let Gladwell be for right now. Of course, outside of just going up of the food prices, we've also seen foreign policy. We've seen African students, being, when being stranded in Ukraine, and about 20% of Ukraine's foreign students are Africans, and we saw how when people are being evacuated from these towns and cities, there seems to be some discrimination on how students were being treated, and the Africans that were staying there were being treated, and so this raised issues, and it became a real problem. So obviously, this is a topic that I would perhaps we might revisit when we do have proper connection with our panelists. That doesn't seem to be the case right now, and maybe the next time we talk about this, I would like to look at the foreign policy, between Africa and maybe Europe, and how this has changed, and maybe how this will change the foreign policy of different countries here, because we've seen the response from, like my country, Kenya. The government was very quick on the onset of this war to castigate Russia, and we've seen how some other countries have resorted to take a neutral position, and we've seen other countries coming out and supporting, other countries offering to mediate between, this crisis from Africa. So like South Africa, I think, offered to mediate, and others. And so this might be a turning point when it comes to foreign policy between Africa and the West, because right now, if you even seem to be supporting or still look to be friendly, to Kremlin, that will be a problem to the rest of European Union and the Western countries, who have other interests here in Africa, and whose foreign policy on Africa differs perhaps largely with that from Russia. So, but that is a subject for another day when we have time. Just a recap of some of the stories that I've looked at this afternoon. Much of it, I think, from South Sudan, but also a former Mali Prime Minister Maiga has died in detention. Remember, after the ousting of President Boubacar Keïta, his Prime Minister was arrested, and he's been going through some medical problems, and his family raised this issue sometimes back in December. The military junta did not want him to seek proper health care until I think it worsened. So they sort of took him to hospital, or they allowed him to go to the hospital. And then after he has passed, now they're coming in and they're saying, they make a statement that, he has died after a long illness, and the military junta is now offering condolences to the family. Like, what are you doing? You should have allowed this guy to go seek, medical treatment, but you refused, and so he has died. So that is what the urgent appeal for drought-stricken Somalia. Now about 4.5 million people are staring at the brink of famine. This is a situation that is very dire, and the United Nations food program is asking for help. Right now there is an increase of internally displaced people, because now people have to move away from their villages to areas where they, homes where they feel they will get water and pasture, and so there has been an increase of diseases, and the situation there is really terrible. When you see images from Somalia and what is happening right now in terms of the drought and famine, it's very heartbreaking. It's really, really very heartbreaking. A new refugee camps, as I've said, there is coming up for internally displaced people. They're beginning to form just inside there in Somalia, and according to the United Nations, almost 700,000 people have been forced from their homes in search of food and water, and the numbers just keep going. The numbers just keep going. So that is also something that we are dealing with in the continent. So I think that is what I had time for this afternoon. Sorry, Gladwell Kirago's network was not very good, so we did not get to engage so much with her this afternoon, but she will be joining us here tomorrow in our morning shows. Thank you so much for your time. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Gutu. Bye-bye for now.